So I'm going to talk about a UK-based initiative called Schools Air Quality Monitoring for Health and Education, or SAMHE for short. And SAMHE's been running for about 3 or so years now. And one of the initial aims of SAMHE was really to see if we could come up with a very scalable, efficient way to monitoring school air quality across the nation. And we do it by deploying a large amount of monitors that measure these metrics. And we do it by enabling any member of staff at the school to fill out a web form, and then we post them a monitor and give them instructions as to where to position it within the classroom and how to connect it to the internet. And as soon as it's connected to the internet, it's sending us data, which is great because we can gather a large-scale data set and try and improve school air quality by influencing the government, teaching unions and other school leaders. But we also try and engender bottom-up change. We spent a lot of effort developing the SAMHE web app, and this empowers any teacher or pupil at the school to get their own account and then access all of the data in with lots of interactive visualizations and loads of activities relating to air quality in their school. They can sort of analyze spikes in the data, think about what caused them. It gives them guidance on how to improve air quality and the like. And this approach of deploying the monitors via staff is citizen science, and it's very scalable. But as I say, the key is that we also provide them access to this SAMHE web app, and that enables the pupils and the teachers to understand and improve their own environments somewhat independently of us, which is a powerful route to change. We're gathering about 100,000 school data days every year. They're gathered from about 800 classrooms in about 450 schools across all 4 nations within the UK. And each data day has minutely measurements of these 5 metrics. So I'll focus a little bit on ventilation and CO2 as an air quality indicator first. So one of the things that's really important for UK schools is that they're predominantly naturally ventilated, and so the levels of ventilation are very slave to the weather conditions. And to illustrate this, we just take one autumn term up to the period of half term. We see that the outdoor temperature is relatively warm. This is an average across UK outdoors across the UK. After half term, we've seen these 2 periods of sort of intermediate cooler weather, and then in late November through to mid-December, we have this really relatively cold period. And if we keep those weather periods, but rather than looking at outdoor temperature, we look at the indoor carbon dioxide levels, we're sort of seeing almost inverse relationship. High carbon dioxide levels during the colder periods relative to the lower periods during warmer weather. And this really emphasizes that we need to think about providing our classroom staff with better training about air quality so that they understand it. Would they need monitors to be able to know when the classroom air is stuffy, and encourage them to use these monitors to help them manage the opening and closing of windows. We have guidance from the government called BB 101, and that stipulates that classroom average CO2 levels shouldn't rise above 1500. And what we see is that when the outdoor temperature is relatively warm, almost all classrooms adhere to that guidance. But once we're down to about a temperature of about 5 degrees outside, about 20% of classrooms struggle to comply with BB 101. And this level of BB 101 is really on the high side of guidance throughout the world. So it's really important that schools at least adhere to this, and it means that we need to emphasize within any training that how staff can manage ventilation on cold days. And we take this CO2 data, and we're big fans of using integral methods to infer period average ventilation rates. In this case, we've gone for a daily average per person ventilation rate, and we can then convert this data at scale. And what we see is that during the warmer period, we're getting about 6 litres per second per person on average, and that's dropping to 4 in the colder periods. And if you look at guidance around the world, typically 8 to 10 litres per second per person is recommended. And so UK schools are really quite poorly ventilated, however you look at things. And we really need to change the government guidance to focus on good levels of ventilation. Because we've got a lot of data, we can control for co-founders. So we control for weather, and sadly we see that schools in areas that are more deprived also have lower ventilation rates or higher CO2. So when we're investing in schools, we really need to try and address this or reduce this inequality. We have for every school a published school pupil capacity target, and we found that schools that were above those capacity targets had higher CO2 levels, and that's an obvious thing that we could do a better job of enforcing. Of course, we all know that good ventilation is no guarantee of good air quality, so we also look a lot at particulate matter. I won't dwell on this for this audience, but we look at PM 2.5. Here's a map of the UK, and in red are all of the SAMHE schools that gave us enough data to be included in this analysis. And what you can see is that in blue are what's called the AURN sites, and they're government-run air quality and weather monitoring sites. So if we start to look at that data over that same autumn term, we can see the outdoor levels in blue, averaged across all of the relevant AURN sites. And if we do a similar thing across all of the SAMHE schools, we see that on average the levels in schools are slightly lower, but crucially there's an extraordinary correlation between outdoor and indoor PM. And a really good example is that in September there was a widely reported Saharan dust event. We can see very strong peaks in the outdoor levels, but the levels indoors are just as high. And so that's really evidence that our outdoor pollution is really dominating the indoor pollution in our classrooms. And if we extend the analysis over 2 terms, we still see this correlation remaining. We see a couple of times when there's exceedance of the WHO guidance, and we're able to do some back trajectory analysis and link that to various factors, predominantly winds changing direction and bringing pollutants up from over Europe and eastern, more agricultural eastern UK over the rest of the UK. But it's important to note that if we look only during school hours, so we exclude evenings and weekends and nights, obviously, and holidays, we see a subtly different picture that informs our sort of exposure potential, given that children are present during school hours only. And we can look at slightly smaller events, these bands in blue, where the outdoor levels don't quite breach WHO limits, but they are higher than the median plus 1 standard deviation. And then we can look at the exposure potential associated with those, the Saharan dust event, this large event in March, and then these series of smaller outdoor events. And what we see is if we include all of these outdoor events, they occur over about 15% of school days, but they account for 41% of the exposure potential. And if we restrict ourselves just to those 2 events where the WHO limits were breached, that only accounts for 8% of school days, but 32% of the exposure potential. So we've seen that our levels in classrooms are very much dominated by outdoor levels. A relatively small number of high outdoor concentration days can result in a significant proportion of the total exposure. It's worth saying, of course, that the majority of the exposure is still occurring on sort of typical outdoor days. We see at least 75% of PM in schools has recently come in from outdoors, and the fact that we get these significant contributions from outdoor events, we really need to focus on maintaining the emphasis on outdoor air as well as indoor air, and with a focus on actually adhering to the WHO air quality guidelines. With an eye on time, I'll skip over this, except to say, we've got no excuse for doing nothing. We have reasonable school architecture. There's loads of retrofit technologies available, and we've done a lot of studies with air filters, and we see that during winter time we get up to about 40 to 50% reduction in PMs. Again, I think monitoring is key, but working with schools is just as important, because we can set the best guidance in the world, but unless the schools are motivated to adhere to it, we're going to get nowhere. And I think that's where I'll leave it. I think I've said everything that I need to do, except that schools are a really good place to gather large-scale data on indoor air quality, and that can be an exemplar for other spaces which are harder to deal with, for example, residential homes and the like. So thank you very much, and I'll stop there.